Good day everyone, and welcome to another vlog for the Exodus 7 to 12 KJV project. Now, as you guys know, we are still continuing with the storyboard phase. You know, putting things together, spacing it out, timing, all that kind of fun stuff. It also enables me to know what scenes I can use very specific modeling for, which will increase my render times. Reduce my render times. You don't want them increased. So I'm going to go through the changes for this week. There are quite a few. Just want to get my note. You think I'd have them ready? Okay, so for the sake of accuracy, the plague description of the frogs will be carried out in a vision kind of way, possibly using hieroglyphics, but there's a way that intros are usually made for anime shows that should create a very cool crossfade kind of effect. I have seen a tutorial on that. If I manage to find that, that will be in the description. What I also want to do is talk about the plagues ending and starting, but with shortening. So let me switch to that quickly so that we can talk about that before I show you the current version, if you will. Okay, here we go. Here we have the frog plague. The blue is a direct scriptural quote. You can see it's verse 5 to 15, this block. So it says here at the end, "But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart, and he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. Then," next verse, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Say unto Aaron, Stretch out thy rod, and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt." Now, you can obviously see that there's quite a bit of detail that has been left out. Having said that, that same detail was included in the previous plagues. For example, he said in the previous one, here we go. It says, "And the magicians tried the same thing with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened so that he wouldn't let the people go. And he also didn't listen to them. Then," it says, "And Pharaoh turned and went into his house. Neither did he set his heart to this also. And all the Egyptians digged round about the river, trying to get water, and 7 days passed." That shows you that there is a space between confronting Pharaoh, being struck by a plague, and him hardening his heart. So what I thought with the frog plague, for example, it also says what I just read, you didn't listen to them, and then it says Moses told Aaron to stretch out his rod. But let me tell you what happens when the plague comes. He says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. If you refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs, and the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly," and so on and so forth. But you can't see a warning for that when it comes to this one right here after the frogs, when the lice come. I think this is the flies. Let me just double check that. Yeah, this one is the frogs. The frogs he has received a warning for, but there was no warning for the lice. I have to double check with the lice and the flies because I still get confused between the two. Funny. So what I believe happened here was, because it's the same situation over and over and over and over again, Moses chose not to include that information because it is kind of fairly obvious that God does not do something without telling his prophets in the first place. And God would not strike a land without warning the land and giving the land a chance to repent. He doesn't work that way. So the difficult thing with this sort of shortening is to visually show that without departing from Scripture. Which means that for some of the storyboards, I removed the lice, because that's usually what happens when he's willing to let the people go. And then the next plague kicks in, which is the flies. So it's just, it's a very difficult, very difficult situation. But like I said before, for the sake of accuracy, we're making the plague description play out as a vision. Having one plague end before the next one starts isn't directly stated, but it's also not implied, if I can say it like that. So it's possible that they overlap, but it's also, in my mind, and the way I feel it, it's very unlikely that they overlapped. Okay, so anyway, moving on. Talking about the flies, I did a little research about the types of flies in Egypt, and I found you could say 3 types of flies. There's the flesh fly, which pretty much just feeds on rotten flesh like any fly would, but this one seems to have its own category. There's the horsefly that stings. It's kind of like a mosquito, but it's a fly. Only the female is able to actually feed off of animal blood, apart from the nectar that the males and the females eat of. And then there's also the common housefly. So there were at least these 3 kinds of flies, and Psalm 78 also supports various kinds of flies as well. If you check out verse 45 about, let me open that in Turbo Bible so you can see that. Okay, it says, He sent divers sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs, which destroyed them. Okay, so let's get back to this part. I just want to show you guys, I colored in some frames, which was... Okay, here we go. So this is the part where Moses and Aaron talk to him, and it switches over to the vision, talking about the frogs coming on the people, in the ovens, kneading troughs, and onto Pharaoh, on his people, and all his servants. And then he's mad, and he chases them out, because he wouldn't listen to them. And then God tells Aaron to stretch out his hand over the river to make frogs. I think this is a frog. Yeah. Make frogs come up out of the river. So the frogs come up. The magicians copy him. And Pharaoh calls for Moses and Aaron. So the 2 frames you see here, I added because of 2 things. Number 1 is, in this instance, Moses and Aaron were still there. You don't call for somebody if they're right in front of you. It just doesn't make sense. So Pharaoh had to go inside full of himself before actually relenting and deciding to call them. So that's why I'm having Pharaoh be heart of heart. Ooh, those R's. Heart of heart. And then he goes inside and, of course, gets frustrated with the frogs, calls for Moses and Aaron, and asks that the frogs be removed. Okay, I just want to see if there was something on the earlier front that I changed apart from the vision. No, that's it. Okay, so let's run through what we have this week in terms of the storyboards already added, and then I'm going to take you to the storyboards that have not yet been added. So getting on from last week, let's say we start from where I had to change it to a more visionary type situation.
Say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs, and the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and into the house of thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine ovens, and into thine eating troughs, and the frogs shall come up both on thee, and upon thy people, and upon all thy servants. Say unto Aaron, Stretch forth thine hand with thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up upon the land of Egypt. Entreat the Lord, that he may take away the frogs from me, and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. Glory over me, when shall I entreat for thee, and for thy servants, and for thy people, to destroy the frogs from thee in thy houses, that they may remain in the river only. Tomorrow, be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God. And the frogs shall depart from thee, and from thy houses, and from thy servants, and from thy people, they shall remain in the river only.
And Moses cried unto the Lord because of the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the villages, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together upon heaps, and the land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart, and hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said.
Say unto Aaron, Stretch out thy rod, and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt.
And that's pretty much where we're at. I do feel like I need to add some sort of narration in here, but it can also work very strongly as a visual description of what is actually being explained, because pretty much it just says, let me just get that. Stretch out the rod, smite the dust. Here we go. It says, but when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart and hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. That's pretty much what it is. And I think that is actually said. Let me just stretch out his rod. Yeah, I didn't add that as narration or dialogue in here. So I don't want to tell everything. I want to show what I can show and keep the dialogue to a minimum, so that pretty much only the dialogue, as far as I can possibly get it, is included audibly. Because the rest is pretty much just a visual's description. Not just of what the environment looks like, but also the attitudes. So, yeah. Anyway, let's get to the storyboards that I was not really able to include here. I finished this about half an hour before bedtime last night. That's why I spent some time coloring in some of the frames, just to relax a little bit, Like this frame over here. There we go. That one where the river was turned to blood. There where the water was struck. There's a few that I actually colored in. Let's just slide back and see. This one where it picks up this serpent. Pharaoh's heart hardens. Snake gets gobbled up. Of course, Pharaoh's face. And these were all colored from the get-go, so yeah. So I'm just going to save that, and let's get on to the other storyboards. So what happens next is that the lights pretty much fill the scenes. And one thing that I noticed this week that I didn't really pay much attention to is the fact that the Israelites got the same plagues as the Egyptians got until the flies. Only when the flies came did God make a distinction. So the lice, the river, the frogs, the Israelites got exactly the same consequences as the Egyptians. So there's no putting the Egyptians under a lens of, oh, they're so evil and Israel is so awesome, none of that. So that's why in this one I have one of Egypt being struck with lice, and of course Goshen as well, so that there is a very clear, not distinction, but equality between the two. There's an interesting verse in, I think it is Ezekiel. Let me just check my notes. I have a better idea. So let's take 7 to 10 and let's have Windows read it. Oh yeah, I love that. You can find a link in the description for eSpeak.
Then said I unto them, Cast ye away every man the abominations of his eyes, and defile not yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. But they rebelled against me, and would not hearken unto me. They did not every man cast away the abominations of their eyes, neither did they forsake the idols of Egypt. Then I said, I will pour out my fury upon them, to accomplish my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. But I wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be polluted before the heathen, among whom they were, in whose sight I made myself known unto them, in bringing them forth out of the land of Egypt. Wherefore I caused them to go forth out of the land of Egypt, and brought them into the wilderness.
Boom, there it is. So that was a very interesting read when I did the study to make all the notes. So at the moment, we are still with the lice, and we're moving on. And then, of course, the Egyptian magicians tried to copy it, but they couldn't. I love the animation they did with some of the Disney cartoons. When somebody used the stick to hit something, it created like these little black sparks to indicate the sound. It's very comical in a way. So I would love to put these little spike lines in where the magicians hit the ground and absolutely nothing happens. Because then they say that it's the finger of God. There we go. They couldn't duplicate it. Now this frame, I want to use it for the flies as well. Not because it's a horse fly, but just because of the fact that the flies really are a nuisance to animals, but they do tend to shy away from nocturnal activity and from a vague remembrance of what I read this week. They also shy away from good stable conditions, whatever the case might be. So then they say that's the finger of God, and then Pharaoh gets angry and his heart hardens. Okay, so here I have two options. One is to show Pharaoh's face angry, with all the lies and all that kind of stuff, and then to fade the heart hardening over his face, like about 50% transparency, which is how I drew it, but I separated them out so that I can test it with the storyboards, and as you can see, it's not yet added, so yeah, or I could do a split screen. I have already done the split screen, so that's not something I'm very keen on using in this instance. So of course then he calls them in and he says, okay, so before we didn't get a resolution on the flies, which is why I said I took away the flies for this frame from the heart hardening to the not listening to them, and he chases them out, so they are kicked out. And of course then God says to Moses, rise up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh and tell him that because he hasn't listened up to now, there's going to come a huge swarm of flies, and in that day you will make a separation between the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, and there will be no swarms of flies there, to the end that he may know that God is the only God on the earth. He says, I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. Midst does not mean middle. It just means if we say, this is the best thing in the world, you're not talking about like in the center of the world. You're talking about like within anyone's capability of getting to or gaining. Okay, so then okay, this is where the lice are still doing their thing or are gone. I'm not exactly sure why I dotted this one. Let's assume it stars. Okay, so then Moses is sleeping, or at least lying in bed. We have the moon shot coming through the roof, then zooming out, showing his face, and God speaks to him and says to him, get up early, go into Pharaoh. And then he speaks to Pharaoh, and of course then night passes and day comes, because he says, tomorrow shall this sign be. So it's already morning, so the sun has to go past, and the moon has to go past, the sun has to come back up, and of course, here comes the swarms. And they come into the houses, and of his servants, of his people, and of course his own place. And in this one, where there's separation between Goshen and Egypt, you can actually show the Israelites inside their houses and the Egyptians being chased around by the flies, but there are no flies in the house. This is a hieroglyphic type illustration for the separation, which can come with a description of the plague. I'm not exactly sure where to use this, but I do really like it. Maybe I use it, maybe I don't. We'll see what God assigns. And then, of course, they are all around the frogs, which are possibly still in heaps, and still the brooms. And, of course, Pharaoh gets angry and calls for Moses and Aaron. And then he says to them, I think this is the one where he says to go sacrifice. Yeah. And he says to Moses and Aaron, they have to go sacrifice in the land. In other words, in Egypt. And then Moses says it's not fitting to do so because they would be sacrificing an abomination unto the Egyptians, which will in turn try to stone them. My guess is, and this just came up in my heart and mind, that Pharaoh would know that. So it would be an easy way for Pharaoh to get rid of Moses and Aaron, to have the people take them out versus him trying to take them out. But thankfully Moses was raised in Egypt, so he knew what the opinions were of the day. Which is also quite encouraging in this one, because it can easily look like, oh, God is so bad, God is so mean, God just kills everyone, blah, 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 blah. But the Egyptians would have done exactly the same thing. In terms of, like they said, it says, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God, and will they not stone us? And then he says, we'll go 3 days journey. And I love that because Jesus was in the grave for 3 days before being raised from the dead. So I just absolutely love that. Into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God. Now, interesting about this 3 days journey thing is when Moses was sent to Pharaoh and he had to take the elders with him, Moses was to tell Pharaoh that Jacob, meaning Israel, is his firstborn. And he has to let him go. And if he does not, he will take his firstborn. And Jesus was also the only begotten Son of God through virgin birth. And he was in the grave for 3 days. And they had to take 3 days journey into the wilderness. It's just, I love it. It's so cool. Anyway, moving on. So then he says to them, go sacrifice in the land. Moses says it's not fitting to do so. They have to go 3 days journey and sacrifice in the wilderness as God will command. And then Pharaoh says, And Pharaoh says he will let them go, that they may sacrifice, only they're not allowed to go very far. And then he should pray for him. Then Moses says, behold, he will go out from Pharaoh, but he has to beware that he does not act deceitfully as he has done before, and, oh goodness, not let the people go. So this was my last scan frame. And then they go out from Pharaoh and pray for him and so on and so forth. But we'll get to that next week. Haha. So that's pretty much it for this week. I hope you guys have an awesome week. Have a great one, and God bless you.